So why is Paul writing Romans? That's the question, right? I mean, we're programmed, I think, in church just to read these verses and to, kind of put them on a billboard and not pay any attention to the reasons. But the reasons why these books were written actually give great insights into what they mean, which is a big problem when we don't know why they were written, because we probably are skewing to some extent unintentionally what they actually mean. Now, we can actually figure out quite a bit about the reasons and background of Romans, at least quite a bit. So let's go ahead and in a few minutes here, let's look at the reasons for Romans. So first of all, where is Paul in the world? Find Waldo. Where is Paul in the world when he writes the book of Romans? Well, most scholars, in fact, I don't know if any significant disagreement on this point, most scholars think that Paul is at Corinth when he writes the letter. Let me remind you a little bit about the geography of it's still there today, actually. So this is Italy over here, the boot, Italy, the boot. This is Greece with, like bad dental work. This is the big nose of Ephesus, or of Turkey today, but it wasn't Turkey then. There were no Turks there at the time. It was Greek in its primary language, or the common language. They had their local dialects, of course. So Paul, in Acts, the book of Acts, we talk about 3 missionary journeys of Paul. And all of the missionary journeys start in Acts at Antioch of Pisidia. No, not Antioch of Pisidia, Antioch of Syria. And so his first missionary journey is to Cyprus and up here to Galatia. That's the first missionary journey. Galatians is written to this region right here. First missionary journey, therefore, is this little hook journey into Cyprus and Galatia. First journey. Second missionary journey starts in Antioch. He goes to Philippi, which is misspelled, by the way, there are 2 L's. Goes up here, and he spends about 2 years at Corinth on his second missionary journey. 2 years, Corinth, second missionary journey. Writes First Thessalonians from Corinth. His third missionary journey, he spends about 3 years at Ephesus, in and around Ephesus. And it's from Ephesus that he writes First Corinthians back to Corinth. This is on his third missionary journey. And then he gets into some trouble with the law at Ephesus. He kind of gets, I think, kicked out of the city. And then he's making his way to Corinth. And when he's up here in Macedonia, he writes Second Corinthians on his third missionary journey. Then when he gets to Corinth, he writes Romans. And so the book of Romans, most would say, was written about the year 57, 58 on Paul's third missionary journey, at the very end of his third missionary journey. Let me go back to that slide. So this is from Romans 16. I'm going to do another video in which I debate, was Romans 16 actually written to Rome? Most think it was. I tend to lean toward those who, in an older generation, thought that it was written to Ephesus. Anyway, written at, I would say, most would say, at the same time that Romans was written, however. So even whether it was written to Rome or to Ephesus, it was written alongside of Rome, and therefore gives us information about where Paul is when he wrote Romans, at the very least. And again, most scholars think it was written to Rome, or at least go with that one. So Gaius, my host, greets you, and the whole church. What church? Why, the church at Corinth. How do we know this? Because 1 Corinthians 1 talks about Gaius being at the church of Corinth. And so Paul is at Corinth, and also Romans 16 begins by mentioning Phoebe, a deacon of the church of Cenchrea. Well, where's Cenchrea? It's one of the port cities of Corinth. And so we have good reason to believe for sure that Romans 16 was written from Corinth. And again, I don't know of any serious question among scholars that the book of Romans, therefore, was written while he was at Corinth. By the way, this Erastus, who's mentioned here, his name is inscribed in a sidewalk that I believe it's still in the ruins of Corinth, that you can go see it. I think it's down by the Colosseum they have there, or the amphitheater. Maybe it's the amphitheater. But anyway, Erastus, the city treasurer, paid for this sidewalk, something like that. So assuming that's a genuine inscription, most treat it as genuine as far as I can tell. This has the ring of history. Quartus, not mentioned elsewhere in Scripture, but these are individuals at Corinth, probably a fairly large, as I've said in my Corinthian videos and such, a fairly large house in which the church at Corinth met, 40, 50 people maybe. So he's writing Romans from Corinth. there's this guy named Tertius. Well, who's Tertius? Where did he come from? I, Tertius, greet you, the one who wrote the letter. Well, this is the secretary. This is the one, the scribe, as it were, the one writing down what Paul is saying and helping him probably edit it and put it into good rhetorical form and so forth. Okay, so we have good reason to believe that Paul is at Corinth when he writes Romans. Like I said, he's at the end of his third journey. He's taking up an offering. We saw this in 1 Corinthians 16. He's been taking up an offering for several years, but he's run into problems. He's finally going to take this. He's got these representatives from across this area of the Mediterranean where he has founded churches, and these representatives are each going with him, taking their contribution from their church and representing their church. So they can't say Paul took from the money. Because these individuals are stewarding the money from their church. Macedonia and Achaia. Achaia is where Athens is. Macedonia is up in the north where Philippi and Thessalonica are, and they're bringing poor money. They're not bringing the poor, but they're bringing money to the poor in Jerusalem. By the way, Galatians 2 points out that Paul or that James and Peter had asked for this. They said they only asked that Paul remember the poor. And so he's remembering the poor. This is the fulfillment of that in Galatians 2, where he's bringing a gift to the poor and possibly a peace offering, because I have a feeling that Paul and the Jerusalem church weren't on the best of terms. They a little uncomfortable. They kind of, hi, hello, Mr. Paul. It's very nice to see you again. Very polite, perhaps, maybe not even that. I don't know. But I don't think that Paul and Peter and James got along particularly great. That's my read. I could be wrong, of course. I'll find out. We'll find out when we get to heaven. Now, he also mentions in Romans 15 that he wants to go on to Spain. He hopes to greet the Romans as he's passing through on his way to Spain. There's a couple of things here. First of all, Paul is a missionary church planter. He plants churches. He's not a long-term pastor. He's not a long-term discipler. He's not I've been at this church for 30 years kind of person. That's just not Paul's gift or personality. He plants things, he moves on. He plants things, he moves on. So he feels like his time in the East is pretty well done. He says here, no longer having a place in these regions, I desire to come to you, and I've desired to come to you for many years. I'm heading west. Go west, young man. I think I do kind of wonder if there's a little pathos here. He founded the churches of Galatia, and then they went off the reservation. He founded the church at Corinth, and if you read 2 Corinthians 10 through 13, which he wrote right before Romans, probably just a few months, if that, before writing Romans, Paul ends 2 Corinthians almost in despair. He's like, I don't know what I'm going to do with you guys. I mean, I'm afraid that when I come visit you, you won't have listened to anything I've said over these years. I've been trying to help you. I've been writing you letters. And I'm not sure that you've learned anything or that you've changed at all. Almost a level of despair, I think, in 2 Corinthians 10 through 13. Similarly, Paul got kicked out of Ephesus, I think. Read Acts 19. I think, he kind of went before the Romans. I think he was jailed for a time there. Some do, some don't. And so, he basically says, no more work for me to do in the East. I'm going west, going to Rome, and then I'm going to Spain. Of course, we know that when he gets to Jerusalem, he gets into trouble there with the Romans. And Acts says that he was under house arrest for about 2 years, or not house arrest, but he was in trouble for almost 2 years there in Caesarea Philippi in Jerusalem. And then he finally appeals to Caesar, and he spends 2 years in house arrest at Rome at the end of Acts. Of course, so he makes it to Rome, not the way he planned. He planned to go there of his own free will. He ends up going, under arrest from the Romans to appear before Nero's administration. So he hopes to pass through Rome on his way to Spain. He's really going to expand the planning mission. Did he make it? Did he not? There are some traditions that he went to Spain, but we really don't know. I personally kind of doubt it, but I can't disprove it either. There are also some misconceptions. Like I said, we look at Paul and we think, man, this guy was like the best, and he really knew God, and he has 13 letters in the Bible. But it wasn't clear, I think, probably to headquarters and to others that Paul was as inspired. In fact, some may have considered him to be a false prophet. Here he gives us a hint in Romans 3 of some misconceptions of what he's preaching. He's telling the Gentiles, well, he's telling them that they don't have to keep the boundary issues. They don't have to be circumcised. They don't have to do the food laws and such. And so he's being accused of saying, let's break the law. We don't have to keep the law. We're not under the law. Let's do whatever we want. And we saw some of that in 1 Corinthians, where he says, well, all things are lawful for me, but not everything's beneficial. And of course, love is what he would say is the fulfillment of the law, that we can actually do the law without being a Jew if we love our neighbor as ourselves. But here we see, he says, why not? As people are maligning us and saying that we say, let's do wicked things so the good things might come. And he's like, that's not what I'm preaching. They've created a straw man of Paul. A straw man is where you're not actually attacking the real positions of a person, but kind of a fake version of the person. It happens all the time in politics, where you misrepresent the person that you're arguing against, and you don't really represent their real position. When I teach philosophy, I talk about how easy it would be to beat up a straw Arnold Schwarzenegger, or a straw stuntman. I could, or a straw muscle man. Yeah, it's made out of straw. I can beat it really well. A real muscle man, I might have more trouble with, or muscle woman for that matter. So this is a mischaracterization of what Paul preaches, as we will see when we get into Romans. Romans 6 through 8 makes it very clear that Paul does not believe that a Christian should just sin however much they want, and that morality goes out the window. That is not Paul's position. He's also seeking peace. If you think that Romans 16 is actually to Rome, then Paul knows an awful lot about what's going on at that congregation. Now, I tend to fall off the log with Romans 16 written to Ephesus, but still, Paul knows something. He knows some stuff about the Roman congregation. And many would argue, and Scott McKnight especially argues in his book, Reading Romans Backwards, that Romans 12 through 16 has a great deal to do with the situation of what's going on at Rome. And of course, McKnight uses that lens to interpret chapters 1 through 8 or 1 through 11 as well. In particular, McKnight thinks that Paul is addressing tensions between the strong and the weak at Rome. The strong being those who are mostly Gentile and don't feel bound to the Jewish law at all, and the weak being mostly Jewish believers who are still quite law observant, and tensions between those two groups. I'll mention that as I go through this course and these videos. So he says, let's not condemn each other. Don't let the strong look down on the weak, and don't let the weak look down on the strong. And Romans 14 and 15 are all about this idea of some people have some convictions about things and other people have other convictions. These two groups should not condemn each other, but should learn to get along with each other. So basically, the way I'm going to present it is Paul is trying to get the congregation at Galatia to get along with the congregation at Corinth while correcting both of their extremes. So we can summarize what we've just said and say that there are at least 4 reasons why Paul wrote Romans. First of all, to announce that I'm coming to visit. Get the guest room ready. I'm coming to Rome. So that's one reason. To introduce himself, because he's not actually been there. He mentions in chapter 1 that he's often wanted to get there, but he's been hindered. Now he can go there, and so he introduces himself. He wants to correct misconceptions that they have about him, because there's a lot of bad stuff, bad blah, blah, blah going on about how bad Paul is out there in the church, and he wants to correct. He's not a pro-sin kind of guy, for example. In that sense, the church today has misread him too, frankly, and also to build peace in the churches there at Rome. So there you have it. There are the reasons that Paul wrote Romans. And so, having done this, let's go ahead and in the next video, we want to dive right in to Romans 16 and look at, and we'll ask this question. Are these Romans? Are these Ephesians? And in general, what can we learn about Paul's churches from Romans 16?